So much has changed in the last 25 years. Encyclopedias have given way to Google, rotary phones to the iPhone. 25 years ago, flat-screen TVs and self-driving cars seemed like science fiction. Yet today, we still fund Michigan schools the same way we did 25 years ago. Michigan's spending per pupil and student performance have dropped dramatically in the last decade. A new approach is needed that prepares all students for college and the 21st century workforce, and one that recognizes all students are unique and have a wide range of learning needs. The School Finance Research Collaborative has completed Michigan's first comprehensive school adequacy study to determine what it truly costs to educate a child. The collaborative is a diverse bipartisan group of business leaders and education experts, from Metro Detroit to the UP, who agree we must change how Michigan schools are funded. The collaborative study was recently completed by the nation's top 2 school finance research firms, with input from nearly 300 Michigan educators. The study determined that per-pupil funding should be increased to provide all students with a high-quality education that helps them achieve and succeed. The study found that it costs a minimum $9,590 to educate a child in Michigan, regardless of location, income, learning challenges, or other circumstances. That amount does not include transportation, food service, or capital costs, and only includes pension costs at 4.6% of wages. The report recommends that brick-and-mortar charter schools and traditional public schools should be funded at the same level, and it quantified additional costs for special education, English language learners, and students living in poverty. The report concluded that 10% additional to the base cost should be provided per career and technical education enrolled student. It found it costs $14,155 to educate a preschool student. The report also determined that funding must be adjusted based on district size, with smaller districts receiving increased funding. And the report concluded that districts in geographically isolated areas and student transportation costs should be addressed so that the unique needs of every district or charter school are fully funded. Rather than a cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all approach to school funding, Michigan's school finance system needs to take a more research-based, individualized approach. Michigan policymakers now have a roadmap to provide adequate and equitable funding for a pre-K-12 education that prepares all students for bright futures. So while Michigan currently ranks at the bottom in student performance, this new study charts a bold course to change that. So much has changed in the last 25 years, and now it's time for the way we fund schools to embrace the future and change as well. To read the study or learn more, visit www.fundmischools.org.
The School Finance Research Collaborative was brought together by top industry experts to re-examine our approach to how we fund Michigan schools to fully prepare all students for jobs and success. Today, we'll have a look at that report and talk to 2 of the members of the collaborative to find out where we go from here. Hello. I'm Superintendent Gerald Hill.
And I'm Bill Mull, Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations for West Bloomfield School District.
Lately, we've been hearing a lot about school funding and a new study by the Michigan School Finance Research Collaborative.
Today we have the opportunity to talk with Dr. Wanda Cook-Robinson, Superintendent of Oakland Schools, and Mr. Robert Moore, Deputy Superintendent of Finance and Operations, also from Oakland Schools. Oakland Schools is our intermediate school district that oversees all 28 school districts in Oakland County. We're going to find out about the state's broken school funding system.
Dr. Cook-Robinson, let's talk about the problem that exists in Michigan. Nobody needs to tell a parent that every child is different. We all know that, especially if you have more than one child. You really know they're different. They're different in their interests, their development, how they develop, their abilities, yet we still fund everybody the same. When we talk about Michigan school funding, it's been said that one size just does not fit all situations, all school districts, all children. What are the indicators that Michigan may have a problem with school funding?
Well, Jerry, we have to start from the premise that we want all the children who attend school in Michigan to get a quality education, no matter what their address is. This will include students who are in the lower part of Michigan as well as in the Upper Peninsula. all districts have different characteristics. For example, we have districts in Michigan that are urban areas that may have high poverty or a high percentage of special education students, and we have districts in the Upper Peninsula that might be geographically isolated, which causes another issue. Or it's a rural district. So what we have to do is to start thinking about a student-centered approach that looks at the characteristics of the students and how do we best provide an education for students who attend in those districts.
So has it been agreed that now is the time to change the way Michigan schools are funded? And if so, who is leading that effort to provide an adequacy study in the state of Michigan?
Well, as you know, Jerry, the state of Michigan did an adequacy study in 2016, but it wasn't a comprehensive approach. It was a very good start, and it gave us some good information, but we still had a lot of questions after that study. So we had a group of business leaders, educators, and other community members and experts to come together and to agree that Michigan's funding system is broken, and that now is the time that we want to step up and look at this issue and find the answer to the question, what does it cost to educate a child in the state of Michigan?
So if I recall right, the previous study may have been funded by the state of Michigan?
Yes.
And so I don't imagine the state would want to fund another study given that they just funded one. So who's funding this current study?
You know, you're absolutely right. It began, Jerry, in November of last year when the Oakland Schools Education Foundation agreed to be the fiscal agent if we were to go for a grant. So we had a group of folks that were coming together having this conversation, again, business leaders and educators and legislators coming together and saying, we need to do this. We applied for a grant through to the Kellogg Foundation, and they were gracious enough to award us with a grant of $100,000 to begin the planning. So we spent a year planning about how to go about this study. And in addition to that, we were able to talk to the foundation community, and we later received monies from the Mott Foundation and the Skillman Foundation, as well as other educational entities like Middle Cities Association and 32 ISDs. This is truly a study where we saw the educational community come together. We stepped up.
So I just have a follow-up question to that. What would motivate these foundations to invest in a study when the state had just completed a study?
You know, Jerry, that's a good question. And the first foundation that we talked to was the Skillman Foundation. And when we met with the president and CEO, Tanya Allen, who, as you know, had led an effort in Detroit with the coalition to look at their schools, and we explained that what we wanted to do was to actually look at the characteristics of quality. If you're going to receive, for example, a quality education in West Bloomfield, what are the factors that are affecting your school district? And how do we address those factors so that you get a quality education equal to a quality education anywhere else in the state? It was not a hard sell. We then went to the Mott Foundation, and we explained to them that we were going to look at not only poverty, how that impacts districts, English language learners, special education, but we also were going to look at preschool, and we were going to include charters. So this is the first comprehensive study that has included preschool and charters. So it was a comprehensive look. We also looked at districts that were geographically isolated, because that causes an issue too. You can't do economy of scale in a district when you have, you know, a small school here in the district and the next school being 400 or 500 miles away. So all of those characteristics, and when we started to share that we were going to do a deep dive on these issues, it wasn't a hard sell at all.
Okay, thank you.
Now the collaborative has completed its study. Bob, you serve as the project director for the collaborative. How do they determine the true cost of educating a student?
Well, there's 4 commonly accepted methodologies used in America to do this, and these kinds of studies are done in other states all the time. In fact, we've had over 30 studies done in just the last 15 years across the country. The state used a particular method when they did their study in 2016. We chose to do 2 methodologies to improve the validity and reliability of the results. And that is one other reason why it not only is, it's way more comprehensive, but it's the best practice. 90% of the states who do adequacy studies use multiple methodologies, and now Michigan has 3. The one the state did and the 2 methodologies we used.
So you really have exhausted and expanded the definition of what adequacy means through the process.
Well, adequacy in this case is way different than the state study. The state looked at districts that were above average on test scores.
No.
The bar for our study was a little higher, a lot higher, and that is, what does it take to get every student to the state standard and comply with the Michigan Merit Curriculum and the graduation requirements? That's a much higher bar than being above average in Michigan, where, as you know, Michigan's below average nationally.
So we all want the best education for our students and our kids, but we're using the term broken when we refer to the current funding system here in Michigan. Wanda, how does this affect the educational process? If we keep saying we're broken, what are we saying is broken?
Well, we're saying what's broken is the way that the money flows to the students. You know, right now we don't have a student-centered approach. And that's what we want to flip, and that's why it's broken. You know, the money is distributed on a formula to districts that doesn't take into account any of the characteristics of the students who attend school there. So it's broken in that sense.
And how does Michigan compare to other states right now in terms of performance?
Well, you know, you're the third person to ask me that question. And to answer that question, we really would have to sit down and look at those states and compare apples to apples. If you want to talk about the highest achieving states in the country right now, you're looking at Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And by the way, they all spend more than Michigan, as high as $22,000 per student. And then there are some states that are performing higher if you're judging it by achievement and tests, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. For example, how are they governed? Is the state boards, do they have the same amount of authority in terms of their capital needs? Are those capital needs in the formula? In terms of English language learners and special education students, are they in that formula? So again, to answer your question really accurately, I would need to look at the districts that we're being compared to and then line them up and see and do that apples to apples comparison, because right now I don't think that's in the equation of the conversation.
So this is just a question I just thought of while you were answering, and either one of you can respond to this. So has Michigan's level of funding, I keep hearing different reports depending who I'm reading. Have we increased our level of funding? Has it remained the same or decreased over the last decade?
Inflation adjusted, we're way behind. In America, on average, the increase over the last decade and a little bit more was about $1,400 per pupil increase.
Okay.
In Michigan, it went down by $663.
Okay.
That's how different the situation is in Michigan. So that's inflation adjusted. This is not us reporting that. That's the governor's 21st Century Education Commission that reported that. And there's a big problem. Not only is our student performance dropping, but our funding is dropping as well on an inflation adjusted basis.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the findings of this study. We're back with Dr. Wanda Cook Robinson and Bob Moore talking about a hot topic in Michigan, school funding.
So now that they have completed the study, Bob, what are they recommending?
Well, there's a series of recommendations, 7 of them actually. So the whole idea was to cost out what it takes to get every student to the state standard. But let's be clear, This is not just about money. You can't just have the money and then not implement research-based, evidence-based practices in the classroom. Have the correct class sizes, the correct instructional supports, the correct intervention strategies. All of that's detailed in the report. So while there are 7 recommendations, in the body of the report, it identifies what research shows helps students improve their student achievement to the point that they would reach our state standard. So again, it's not just about money. Money is part of it. You have to use it correctly to get all kids to the state standard. So these recommendations are essentially the building blocks of a funding formula that is student-centered, as Wanda mentioned, based on the needs of the students and the characteristics of the districts and charter schools. So there's many elements to the formula. The most important one is the first one, the base cost for a regular ed student. That is reported at $9,590. And that excludes transportation, and it excludes the legacy cost for pensions, which we know is extremely high in Michigan. About 21% of all wages is a legacy cost. So we pulled that out of the base cost. As a result, that base cost applies to every regular ed student, even if they're in a charter school, all the same. Then there's adjustments for career and technical ed, special education, English language learners, and poverty. Those are the 4 characteristics that get additional funding on top of the base, which are student-centered, based on the needs of the student. And then there are district characteristics taken into account: geographic isolation and enrollment size. We have 193 districts that have less than 1,000 students. And the average size of that group is a little more than 500. They have no economies of scale, so they need more per pupil, and often they're geographically isolated on top of that. Transportation is also a separate issue. The report recommends funding that on a per rider basis, which is one of the 5 ways that states in America fund transportation. And that way it's more equitable. We're creating more equity of opportunity for students, because right now there is no funding dedicated for transportation of regular education students. And we're spending nearly $700 million in Michigan on student transportation a year. That whole mechanism needs to be revised based on this research.
So before I go to my next question to Wanda, Bob, I noted in the study that the figure for preschool is somewhere around $14,000. Why is that number so much different or higher than for the $9,500 for K to 12?
The ratio between students and teachers, that's the big one.
Yeah.
And another thing is that the certified teachers were used for the preschool program in this study, not non-certified teachers, and that's a big change for Michigan. So it's the loading of students to teachers and the number of adults that are in the support staff for preschool that drives that cost up. That cost will create a high quality preschool program for both 3 and 4-year-olds.
And either of you on this one, I've heard that investing in preschool is a wise investment, and that it more than pays dividends down the road for students.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we know that if we can give our young students a very good, solid start, I think that was some of the questions and some of the issues behind the 3rd grade reading bill. We want to make sure that by the time those students get to 2nd and 3rd grade, that they have all of the cognitive structures that they need to build on for success. And so what this study does is to actually put that funding on the front end so that we can get the return on the investment on the back end.
Very good. So Wanda, we know that the world has changed dramatically since Proposal A back in 1994. That seems like a generation ago.
It does.
We had the advent of the internet, globalization, global competition, increased automation. You can go on and on. What does our system need to do to adjust to the dramatic changes in our society?
Well, the first thing we need to do is to talk have more conversations about educational reform and what that looks like. And we need to talk about educational reform based on the research, like the study that we presented here. You know, we can keep the innovation going. We don't want to stifle innovation. We want our students to be able to be flexible in their learning. We want them to make sure that we're building those cognitive structures for them that go up the taxonomy and that they can create new knowledge. But in order to do that, we're going to have to provide a quality educational environment. We must level the playing field for every child that attends school in the state of Michigan in order for that to happen.
So if we want to reach our top 10 in 10 years, this sounds like this study is proposing the kind of resources that we need to invest in public education.
Absolutely. It's giving us a roadmap. Now, there are a lot more things that we're going to have to consider. And members of the collaborative have been having numerous conversations with others about what does that look like? What does the instruction look like? For example, if we're asking for the bar to be raised, and we want the 9,590 students, with that comes some responsibility to us as educators. That means that we're going to have to use those funds appropriately, and that we're going to have to look at research-based instructional solutions to be implemented. So, and an accountability system. So, we're going to have to take those things into consideration as well.
Sure.
And I think my colleagues are ready to do that.
Okay, so now that the study has been completed, in addition to what you've just said, where do we go from here? We have a study, now what?
Well, we need to have a little support from everyone in the community, including those in business, industry, and education, to help us to share the results. What we've been doing is presentations, not only in school districts, but also with other associations, with business leaders, and sharing with them what we found. There is a group that has come together, and their task is to put together the framework. And let me back up just a little bit. I want to share that the first phase of this study, in which the Mott Foundation, the ISDs, the educational entities put money together for the study, we committed to doing the study and just the facts. So that phase is coming to an end as we share those results. In order to go to the second phase, we need a plan for the next group to take it forward. And there is a group that has come together. They are business and education experts, and they are designing a framework for what should happen next, which will include advocacy and some other things. But our phase is finished.
Great.
To improve students' performance, we must change how we fund Michigan schools to meet the needs of all students. Tell us about the timing of this study and why it is crucial right now to get the word out.
The timing is really driven by the fact that the first state study didn't use multiple methods, wasn't comprehensive. So we were right on the spot with the Kellogg Foundation's help getting started to improve upon that effort, and we did. And it's taken us up until this time. But this is a pivotal year. This is an election year. Every member of the House, every Senate seat, and the governor all of those races are going to be in August and November of this year. This is an important opportunity to say, here's what we've learned. We need to use this information to reform education in Michigan. We know our results have been sinking in terms of student performance over the last decade, and we have to reverse that. Reform is needed, but it needs to be research-based, and that's exactly what we intend to do: communicate, educate, and inform between now and the election and beyond.
So Wanda, how can our audience keep these important education issues in the forefront?
Well, there are several things they can do. One, share the information. Share it at the PTA meeting, and we hope you'll share it at your board meetings. We hope that other educational agencies, well, like our teachers, our social workers, our communication folks, when they come together, they will share it, and beyond with business and industry. We need to help everyone understand the perimeters of the study and have conversations like we're having today, so that we can give a little more explanation or help individuals understand what we mean when we say it's student-centered. what we mean when we say that this particular study is based on the characteristics of the student and the district. So help us get the word out. We need ambassadors.
We will certainly do that. I would like to thank Dr. Cook Robinson and Bob Moore for being with us today, and we hope that this helps start the conversation in our local community. I know it's going on statewide, and how we can best provide the building blocks for new school funding for the purpose of improving student outcomes and the success and the future of all of our students.
Right.
Thank you for joining us today, where we have taken a closer look at Michigan school funding.